Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Production Control Overview, Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. My name is Tim, and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. The recording will be made available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamic page within the coming weeks. If you have questions for our presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the session and in a live segment at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Krupke, Senior Fast Track Solution Architect, Phillip Seaton, Senior Solutions Architect, and Johan Hoffmann, Senior Product Manager. Anne, over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Tim. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us today to talk about the production control module in Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. And thank you, Johan, for joining us. He is the product manager for asset management and production control. My name is Anne Krupke. I am a Senior Fast Track Solution Architect at Microsoft. You can see my contact information and LinkedIn here. If you have any questions after the event, feel free to reach out or connect with me on LinkedIn. Now let's pass it over to Phil to introduce himself as well.
Hi there, my name is Phillip Seaton, and I'm also a Senior Fast Track Solutions Architect for the North Americas region. Today also happens to mark my 1-year work anniversary, and so I'm very excited to be commemorating that by presenting my first Tech Talk here with Anne and Johan.
Thanks, Phil. Let's talk about this series. This Tech Talk that we're doing today kicks off a new series on production control. We have 7 parts planned for the initial series, and we'll do 1 Tech Talk per month. We'll start today with a high-level overview of the module and then dive into the different modes of production and round out the series with some deep dives into specific features in the production module. If you have other suggestions for sessions to include in the series, please let us know in the chat survey at the end of the session. Of course, we're back again with the riddle of the day. And today the question is, what do you call an artificially intelligent cabinet? Feel free to put your answers in the chat and we will reveal the answer at the end of the session. Let's recap very quickly what we're going to cover today. We'll start by introducing the business process covered in the production control module, which is called Plan to Produce. Then Phil's going to talk about how we can execute production in Dynamics SCM itself, and then I'll take it back, do a short demo navigating the production control module in Workspace, and then we'll talk about the example scenario that we're going to use throughout the series. Phil will then wrap us up with some additional resources, and we have time at the end for Q&A. So let's dive in and talk about the Plan to Produce business process. And before we get too deep into that, let's define what we mean when we talk about production. Production is the process of taking resources such as material, labor, and/or machinery to create some output. It is also often referred to as manufacturing or fabrication, although these terms may have a slightly different technical meaning. In this series, we'll typically use the term production because it encompasses the broadest set of use cases. At the heart of production, there are several key concepts that we're going to bring up throughout the series, so let's walk through what they are. The first concept is a finished good. This is a term used to refer to an item that we have completed in the production process and is ready to be sold to our customer. Next, we have subassemblies, which are also often referred to as semi-finished goods. This refers to an item that's undergone some production steps, but will then be used as a component to make a finished good. Next, we have raw materials. Raw materials are the inputs to the production process, which will be used to create subassemblies and the finished goods. In specific industries, they're often referred to as components, ingredients, or bulk material. Our next concept is scrap. This is any excess or unusable material, subassembly, or finished good that might be thrown away or reused or reworked during the process of production. You may also call it waste, byproducts, or remnants. The next big concept is our production schedule. This refers to our detailed plan of what production we're going to do in a certain time period. It helps us coordinate our planning and sourcing efforts and communicate delivery dates to customers. And finally, the next general concept is subcontracting, which is also known as outsourcing or tolling. This is the process of using a vendor to help do some or all of the production process of a particular item. We will do a deep dive specifically on subcontracting, but these are 6 just key terms and concepts that we will again use throughout the series. So we want to make sure we are defining them straight at the beginning. Now let's talk about the business process that covers production, which I mentioned before is called plan to produce. Of course, the detailed execution of this business process is going to be different depending on your business model, but we group the activities into some high-level process steps that we're going to walk through now. The first thing a business does is define their production strategies. This might include the different modes of production you're going to use and the strategies, which we'll talk about in just a minute, but also what materials you need for production, what are the steps that you're going to go through, the capacity of your production facilities, what your planning process is going to look like. And all of these have to do with the foundations that we're going to run our production process on. Once we have our foundation built, we start looking at planning our production operations. This would maybe include generating a demand forecast, looking at our supply schedule, generating our production schedule, which we just introduced, planning our labor and things like that. Once we have a firm schedule that we're getting ready to get started on, we need to communicate that plan to the shop floor. That might include printing production documents, moving material around our warehouse, or checking equipment to make sure it's ready for production. Once we're ready to make our product, we will execute the production process, which might include tracking consumption of materials and labor, looking at our finished goods, recognizing our finished good or subassembly inventory, and updating our overall material levels. Another key part of the production process is to control production quality. While this is shown as a step in a linear diagram, many companies actually have ongoing quality activities that are done throughout the entire process. You might look at trends in product defects, both for finished goods and raw materials. You might look at your scrap rates or material yield, vendor compliance, and your quality process may even include generating quality documentation to send to your customer. And of course, we also need to evaluate our production process. We do that through defining and measuring our production metrics. This might be throughput tracking, analyzing your production costs and variances, looking at OEE or overall equipment effectiveness, or just measuring any other key indicators that are relevant to your business's process. When we talk about production and how it looks for different companies and different industries, there are 4 high-level categories which we use to refer to the different modes of production that are supported in Dynamics. These are discrete, process, lean, and project-based. Discrete refers to production that normally results in distinct items. Think of products that are tracked in units of eaches, boxes, rolls, etc. Some industries that commonly use discrete manufacturing includes apparel, furniture, and the electronics industry. The second mode of production that we support in Dynamics is process manufacturing, which is also commonly known as continuous or batch manufacturing or production. This type of production is typically used when our production flow results in items which are tracked by volume or weight, or when our process might have multiple outputs, which we refer to as co-products and byproducts. Common industries that use process manufacturing are chemical and plastics, food and beverage, and pharmaceuticals or life sciences. Next, we have lean production, which is less about the specific kind of item you produce and more about the methodology of your item. Lean is an industry standard set of practices which are designed to maximize productivity and minimize the waste in your production process. It's often used in repetitive production processes, and it's really focused on identifying the value in your process. It originated in the automotive industry and is also commonly used in printing and HVAC. And fourthly, we have what we call project-based production. It might also be referred to as job shop manufacturing. This mode of production is used when the item or product that's being made is either custom, takes a long time, or has a large number of steps that are part of the production process. It also allows us to have a more granular billing schedule with the customer based on milestones or time passing. It is commonly used in equipment or machinery production, drug development and manufacturing, and construction, as an example. Projects are also often used by manufacturers to track R&D, research and development, and trial runs of new products. Businesses are not restricted to operating with a single mode of manufacturing. You can see, for example, that we've listed pharmaceuticals as a common industry under both process and project-based manufacturing or production, because both formats can support their business model. When a business uses multiple modes, we would refer to them as a mixed mode manufacturer. We will cover all of these production modes in more depth in our deep dive sessions throughout the series, but we just want to make sure we know that they exist and what the general characteristics are of each mode of manufacturing. In addition to having different modes of production, there are also several different strategies that manufacturers use to determine the execution of their production processes as they relate to the relationship between supply and demand. The idea with choosing a production strategy is to figure out what the right balance between push and pull is. In other words, how much of the production process do you plan to do before you actually receive a customer order? Let's walk through some examples of production strategies and where they sit between push and pull and why you might choose to use them. First, we have make to stock. The idea with this strategy is that you'll have finished products on hand at the time customer orders are placed. This strategy is often used in industries which have a low mix of items with high demand volumes, industries with short customer lead time tolerances, or businesses who want to maximize production efficiency by planning further in advance. One example would be in retail, where companies with brick and mortar stores need to have inventory on hand when the customer visits their store. So their strategy will be a lot more push of supply versus pull. Next, we have assemble to order. And in this strategy, we're incorporating a little bit more pull by having the components of the finished good ready to be assembled at the time of the customer order. This is more effective than make to order for companies that have a higher mix of items, which may share some components, which allows them to be more flexible with their materials versus storing fully assembled items. But it still allows them to maintain a reduced customer fulfillment lead time. Moving closer to the middle, we have configure to order, which is a strategy that's used when your product offering has a standard scope with specific customizations that are determined at the time that the customer is placing an order. For example, think of a laptop where you'll pick the color, memory storage, and processor chip. It's not as cost effective to have all possible configurations of each laptop on hand. So instead, the business might decide to stock the various components and subassemblies and then configure them based on each order's customizations. Now, venturing over into the heavier pull strategies, we have make to order. In this strategy, the production of an item is deferred until a customer order is placed. This allows the business to minimize their inventory on hand of finished goods, but is only possible in scenarios where that longer fulfillment lead time would be acceptable. This is more common in industries that might have a higher mix of products they offer that have respective demands that are lower, or industries where components have a limited shelf life, such as food and beverage. And the strategy that we're going to talk about, which is most pull and not very much push at all, is engineer to order. In this case, the general scope of the items that we offer is defined, but the actual design is only finished at the time the customer order is placed. This is a very common strategy in industries which require the ability to have very custom solutions, such as building construction or bespoke machinery. As a final note, these are not the only strategies which are used in production, but are some of the most common. And you'll find that most of the time, businesses incorporate multiple strategies into their production process, whether it's for different items that they offer or different components of the same item. While plan to produce is the business process that encompasses the steps of actual production, it also ties into pretty much all of the other standard business processes, which I've listed out here on the slide. In general, when we're looking at business solutions for manufacturers, we should think and talk about how someone in the manufacturing industry might use each and all of these processes. Plan to produce is by no means a process that operates in a vacuum, and we'll show how some of these process overlaps occur as we go deeper into the production module. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Phil to talk about what production looks like in Dynamics.
Thanks, Anne. Now that we've covered the concept of production, we'd like to discuss at a higher level how Microsoft Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management provides the functionality to manage production processes. As this is the introductory tech talk in this series, we will not be addressing all of the features and settings that are available, and further details will be presented later in the series. So before we get into the how, I'd like to start with the why. So why use Dynamics 365 SCM to manage your production processes? It helps you plan your purchases, production orders, and capacity, provide accurate estimated delivery dates for your customers. There's great tracking of current production statuses available. And by setting up standard operating procedures in your controlled ERP environment, it allows you to scale your operations efficiently. During processing, lots of data is generated to help get useful insights into your production costs and variances, and to help identify areas where your company can improve. So where do we start with SCM when we want to define our production process? Well, let's refer to Anne's previous slide that outlined what is production and dig in a bit further to see how it relates to the features available in Dynamics. First, we need to define what we are making and the components that are needed to produce it. In Dynamics, this can be done by defining a bill of materials or a formula for a specific product. Next, the people, places, and things needed to complete the work and when they are available will have to be specified. Production control calls these resources, and this can refer to workers with specific skills such as welding or painting, machinery that has a finite production capacity, specialized tools that may be available in limited quantities, and locations or facilities where the work will need to be completed. Once these items have been defined, now we can set up the route. This is the series of operations that need to be executed in order to make the finished product. And finally, once the resources have been consumed and the route completed, you'll be left with your finished good, co-products, and byproducts being added into your inventory. So now let's start with defining what we are going to make. Discrete production processes in Dynamics 365 SCM require that a bill of materials, or BOM, be defined on the product. Here we have an example product pulled from the Contoso demo data, where you can see the BOM for the standard speaker product, and that to make one unit, it requires a wiring harness, mid-range and tweeter speaker units, a crossover and a cabinet, the quantity of each item required, and where the items are stored. As the product composition evolves, Dynamics also supports maintaining multiple versions of the BOM for a given product. Process production in Dynamics also requires a formula be defined. Both the BOM and formula serve a similar function in that they are used to define the components that will be used to create the product, although there are additional functionalities available for formulas that will be covered in detail in later tech talks. Now we have an example from another company in the Contoso demo database. Here is the formula for some delicious orange juice concentrate. You can see which ingredients are required and in what quantities they would be needed to produce one batch. Now let's take a look at some of the resources that will be used in this process. Here are two examples as defined in production control. First, we have hardworking Sarah, one of our company's best assets. From this resources form, we can see that her defined working hours are tied to the production calendar and that she has the speaker production capability. Next, we have reliable unit 4101, which we'll refer to as Little Phil. Here we can see that this machine is available during the time frame defined in the 8-hour calendar, and that it can be used to fill and pack frozen juice concentrate. As referenced on the previous slide, a calendar defines the dates and times a specific resource will be available. This slide shows the details of the 8-hour calendar that was assigned to Little Phil. You can see how production for individual days can be marked as open or closed, and what time of day production can occur. Wow, it looks like Little Phil gets a longer lunch break than I do. So now let's get down to how the sausage is made, literally. Setting up the route entails defining the series of operations that need to occur to generate the product. Here we have the routes specific to producing the concentrated orange juice and speaker product we set up earlier. Along with each step in the route, you can also define the resources that are necessary to complete the operation. We know that Little Phil is a banger when it comes to filling and packaging OJ, and since he can fill the resource requirement for that operation, he would be listed under the applicable resources here. For lean production processes, we have a production flow. This tells the system both what we are going to make and how we are going to make it, combining the concepts of BOM or formula and route. Here we have the visualization of the production flow for the standard speaker assembly that shows the steps that are going to be taken: assembling the cabinet, wiring, and final assembly, and the components used are noted by the picking activities in the replenishment steps. Great. Now we've got nearly everything configured and are ready to execute our production process. So what do we do next? At this step, we'll start generating orders based on the production strategy of your company and the documents that will be used to record the progress of production. In Dynamics, these are referred to as production orders or batch orders, depending on the process defined, and are also commonly known as work or works orders, manufacturing orders, or jobs. You'll note that on both the production order and the batch order here, we have links back to the route that we set up earlier. And while the production order for the standard speaker links back to its BOM, the batch order for the orange juice links back to its formula. The equivalent tracking document in lean processing would be known as the Kanban, which uses the production flow we just mentioned as the source for its picking and other activities. If you want a more user-friendly layout to see how your production schedule is panning out, there are tools available in Dynamics 365 SCM to help fulfill this requirement. First, we can generate Gantt charts, which are a visual representation of the timeline needed for the work to be completed and can be displayed for an individual production order or for a series of orders. In this example, we are showing the resource view and have expanded the section showing how long it would take Sarah, our speaker assembly worker, to complete the speaker production, with the darker colored segment indicating the currently selected order. The Kanban scheduled board gives a similar user view of the order planning layout for lean production as the Gantt chart does for other processes. For those workers on the shop floor, they will regularly be interacting with the production floor execution interface shown here. This allows workers to see the jobs that are queued for them, report progress of effort on those jobs, and will display data from intelligent sensors so they can quickly identify when little Phil isn't feeling so well and needs a bit of a tune-up. There is an existing Tech Talk that covers this tool in greater detail, and an updated version will be published later this summer. Like the production floor execution interface, we have the Kanban board for process or transfer jobs for lean processing. This is the one-stop shop for workers processing Kanbans, where they will be able to update statuses and see instructions. As Anne had mentioned earlier, the plan to produce process does not execute in a vacuum, and in Dynamics 365 SCM, production control is highly interconnected with many other modules. Through this session, we only explicitly reviewed the production product information setup for BOMs, formulas, and routes that the production processes are dependent on, though keen-eyed observers would note there were other data displayed that is pulled from other modules. Be sure to follow the rest of our series to get more insight into these other connections. And with that, I'll pass it back to Anne to go over an example scenario and a demonstration.
Thanks, Phil. Now that we've talked about the business process and terminology we use in production and in Dynamics, let's talk about the example company that we're going to be using throughout the series to illustrate production concepts, the fictional Purple Pillow Company. The Purple Pillow Company, or PPC for short, is a US-based manufacturing company which produces pillows and other bedding products. They have 3 main sites in the US which do production, which represent some of the different business units. In Site 10, they take fabric, thread embellishments, and pillow inserts and produce pillows of various shapes, sizes, and styles. This site primarily uses discrete as their method of production. Site 30 houses the foam production site, which takes various chemicals and produces the foam inserts for pillows as well as other foam products. This site runs process as their mode of production, since they're using more of a continuous manufacturing process, and some of their processes have multiple outputs. And Site 40 is the business unit which does custom embroidery and finishes on a standard set of pillow covers and cases that are made to order. This site runs lean to support their business model that is used to produce pillowcases. Now let's hop over to the system really quick to get an overview of what the production control looks like, module looks like for the Purple Pillow Company. This is our Purple Pillow Company Dynamics 365 supply chain management environment, which is the environment we'll be using to demonstrate our deep dives as we go through this series. Let's navigate to the production control module, which, if you scroll down, is arranged alphabetically. And under production control, we have several different areas that are useful to us. The first item is our workspaces. We have one, which is production floor management, and we'll come back to that in just a second. Next, we have our production orders, and this shows us all of our production orders as well as different views. And then we have a detailed view into our current operations, our Kanban menu, which covers our data for lean, manufacturing execution, which is where we have that production floor execution that Phil was just talking about earlier, menu for doing adjustments to production postings, our standard inquiries and reports that are associated with production, our periodic tasks, and our setup. We'll go through all of this in much more detail as we go throughout the series. But before we finish, I want to show you the production floor management workspace. This is a workspace that's designed for a supervisor or manager to be able to work with relevant data and control the production process. So this workspace allows me to customize based on my needs to view certain areas. So I can specify if I want to look at a particular production unit, for example. I can also create a new production order or batch order directly from the workspace. In the workspace itself, I have a visual view of the jobs that are currently in process and the list of different views of jobs, as well as my team and my contacts that are relevant for me. Up here at the top, we have several different tiles which relate to data about my production process, and several of them on the right you'll see are related to warehousing work with production, and how those two go together will actually be covered in a deep dive session later on in this series. For now, let's look at production orders to release. This is production that's ready to be started. You can see here that it is a visual tool. We have our ready to be released indicator. And if we click on the one that has a warning, we can see more details. So under critical on-hand inventory, my cotton thread is not available for this order. And I notice I have some on hand, so I can do some investigation to determine whether it can be reallocated. From this view, I can also look at the Gantt chart, which Phil talked about just a few minutes ago. And the Gantt chart shows me the list of activities for particular orders, as well as other orders that are operating on those resources. There's also some capability around adding material availability, different colors for different orders, and looking at capacity as well. So that is a summary of what you can use the production orders to release form for, although there is more to it, and we'll definitely come back and talk about that. At the bottom of this workspace, we have different links that also may be relevant to me as a supervisor or manager. I can see orders and resource and consumption information. That concludes our tour of the production control module. It was very high level, but we will go into more detail and have more deeper demos in the additional sessions in this series. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Phil to talk about resources and recommendations.
Thanks, Anne. If you'd like to learn more about production and dynamics, but don't want to wait until the rest of the Tech Talk series is published, there are numerous resources available to aid you in this effort, and these links will be made available in the chat as well as with the recording once it's published. We have several Tech Talks available on related topics such as manufacturing accounting and production variance analysis, as well as other production-related Tech Talks that we will be refreshing as part of this series. On Microsoft Learn, you can find documentation that provides an overview of the entire production process, as well as guided training paths to help you get started. Once you feel familiar with the material, go ahead and take the SCM Functional Certification exam, then proudly display your hard-earned badge on your LinkedIn profile. Just to note, the MB335 exam will be replacing the MB320 exam soon. We also have a great community surrounding the Dynamics 365 ecosystem. join our Yammer channels, and get direct interaction with the engineers from the product group and access to preview programs. Our community site is a great way to connect with other users that have been in your situation and would be able to provide a similar perspective regarding system usage. If there is a feature or function that you feel would benefit the platform, visit our ideas portal and suggest for it to be added to the application. And also be sure to vote on any other ideas you'd like to see incorporated. Lastly, be sure to follow the Dynamics Fast Track team on LinkedIn and get access to our new Fast Track magazine publication. And just as a reminder, this is again the beginning of this series, and you can see here again the topics that we are currently planning to do deep dives on in the upcoming months. Please let us know in the feedback survey or in the chat if there are any other topics you think we should cover. Now I'll pass it back to Anne to wrap up with what you really stuck around to find out.
Which is the answer to our riddle of the day. What do you call an artificially intelligent cabinet?
Oh, geez, Anne, I don't know. What do you call an artificially intelligent cabinet?
Shelf-aware. All right. With that, Phil, I'll pass it over to you for our question section.
Okay. At this time, we'll address anything that was asked during the Q&A. Johan's been diligently responding as we've been going through. Johan, is there anything of note you'd like to discuss publicly while we've got a few minutes?
No, actually not. I think I've been published. I published all the questions here. There was a question around, the more around production costing and all the setup around that. But I think, Phillip, you answered that question, and there's a separate tech talk that addressed that topic.
Okay. Andy, do you have anything you would like to address?
I see that we had a question about modifying fields on the production floor interface.
Oh, that was PFE, yes. We added that capability not that long ago. You can also now personalize the production floor execution interface, adding columns, adding fields, and so on, as you know from the other client pages.
Okay.
Okay,
Do we have any unanswered questions, Phil?
Yeah, it looks like we just got one. Are there any additional visualizations to support production planning coming?
So besides the Gantt chart, there are no other visualization options. And of course also and the lean production flow visualization. Then we have a question around any AI capabilities to support production decision making. Not at this point, but this is definitely something we are working on, how we can leverage AI capabilities to take the right decisions.
Okay. So just to ask, another common question that we typically get is, can I use multiple modes of manufacturing within the same company?
Yes. We did mention it briefly at the beginning, but you can set up different modes for different items or different sites, and we do fully support mixed mode manufacturing.
There is also
another. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a question around if can projects be linked to the production floor. So you can of course have project-based production orders, and if you're talking about the execution phase in the production flow execution interface, you can search by the project ID. So you can find the production orders with specific projects. We cannot register project activities on the production flow execution interface, but that is something that is on the roadmap. Then there's also a question around if we are planning to do any tech talks around time and attendance. And maybe Anne or Philip, you can add in here.
I don't think we have one specifically for that module yet, but it's a good suggestion and we can talk about it on our side and work to get one scheduled.
Yeah.
There's also an ask about project-based manufacturing. Is that going to be covered in the existing, or maybe we should take that as feedback and expand the series?
Yes, it wasn't on our list of initial sessions, but I definitely think we should. So we will add that to our list of sessions that we want to talk about with production.
There's also a question regarding the actual schedule for these. Unfortunately, we don't have that exact dates published. We just sort of put the general months we expect them to be released.
We have worked through, we're just in the process of getting them all on the website with specific dates. So we will make sure that when we are sending the email through the link. So if you haven't subscribed to get notifications of upcoming Tech Talks, please do so. We will send updated information through that link, and we'll also make sure to publish ourselves as well when those are finally on the website. But we are in the process of getting all of the sessions up on the website. In terms of, I did see a question about specific production control parameters, and we did stay very high level throughout this session. We will go, we'll go through specific configurations in much more details in the next few rounds of Tech Talk. So this was just meant to be more of an overview, and we will go further into depth about specific configurations as we go through the series. We have another question from Florin. Do we have any out-of-the-box option through which customers can produce finished goods without consuming raw materials, labor, or overheads, which has been requested by some customers, creating costing cases with their setup and manufacturing? Johan, do you want to start with this?
Yeah, I think I need a little bit more details, but it is indeed possible to create a production order. The bill of material is not required. Not the route. So you might think about what could that be, producing something without materials and routings. So I think I need to have a little bit more details into that.
Yeah, and I think that if I was talking to the customer, I would ask, why don't we want to track any of those things? So I agree, maybe needs more details. And I think that's it for questions for now.
Right.
If you do have any questions that come up afterwards that you think of, oh, we got another question while I was saying that. Through the production floor execution interface, can we handle machine start stop with which user, and is it the primary or secondary operation? So I will very high level answer, and Johan, you can correct me or add anything, but we can track machine start stop, and there are options around putting a group of people together or people and machines to work on the floor. We'll cover that in more detail during our production floor execution deep dive. Johan, anything you want to add there?
No. Then are you able to do a walkthrough on the project's production flow, specifically looking to support engineer-to-order operations?
Yes, I think we need to add that as an additional session to our list, and then we can make a use case that is specifically engineering to order. So we can add that to the list of sessions. And that, I think, is the last of our questions. So I'm going to pass it back to Tim to wrap us up.
Thank you, Anne. I am posting a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd love to hear your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be made available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters today and to you, our audience, for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of the day ahead.